Today we get to talk to Tim Gaiser on Serves You Right. My name's Andrew. I'm super excited to do this episode. Tim is a Master Sommelier, world-renowned wine expert, educator, an author, and just a super fun and cool guy. We get to talk about tasting, we get to talk about different certification programs and what it actually takes to make it. That's really cool. And Tim actually offered to help me out a little bit after this, so we'll see. Maybe next year I'll be passing the advanced. All right, without much further ado, here's Tim Gaiser.
Hey there.
How's it going?
Good, Andrew. How are you?
I'm good. Are you still in Phoenix, or have you made it home?
No, I got home yesterday, late afternoon. Yeah.
Awesome.
So I'm sure you saw big results, huh?
I haven't seen how many people made it through.
Well, there were 87 total students taking it, which is the biggest exam ever, and 55 people passed.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it is.
Honestly.
Yeah, it is pretty good.
Yeah. I think the one time I got through theory, 2022 or 23, I'd have to look back at my notes. I think only about 50% passed that year.
Yep.
So,
Well, it's, historically the pass rate is about 30%.
yeah.
And then
I was thinking 50 even sounded high.
Yeah. But again, that was before when people would take all three parts of the exam, right? So now that people have to pass the theory first and they show up, I think maybe they're better prepared. I don't know. But this was also a perfect storm. A lot of repeat offenders taking the exam again. A lot of first-time people, well prepared, especially on service. We saw some really good service, on Monday. And then same thing on Tuesday with tasting. My panel, we saw, some really good tasting. So, it always goes in cycles. And, yep. So people were prepared.
I was almost one of those. You almost had one more there, but
I can't believe 59% theory. That's tough. Yeah.
Oh, it's fine. Even when I got through theory last year, I think it was a 65%, which, I mean, it is a hard test. So
Yeah, it is.
I tell
It is.
even
Yeah.
my colleagues, I say, this isn't a test you get 100% on.
No.
It's not going to happen.
No, but at the same time, it's people's backgrounds really comes into play with these exams. So if you spent time in college and you're used to studying for exams and writing papers and taking tests, that's really one thing. And so that's a huge help, because then you study habits are kind of there. And but if you don't have that, the theory part is really hard for people, right? So and then you have to work in a really good restaurant for the service.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't have those mechanics down every day, it's hard to do it.
Just
roll.
Yeah.
Yes. When in Rome, do as the Romans do.
Yeah, and I was in Germany and Austria both this spring, so very cool.
Yeah. No, I saw some pictures on your Instagram. Austria, I think it was the one I saw recently. And, I say when in Rome, and the first thing I thought of is strong water. Your tale in China, I believe, eating jellyfish, if I remember correctly, and boiled pig blood.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like a big bowl full of snot. It's just so slimy, and then it's like this low tide, and that texture. I mean, slimy, I think, is a favorite texture of the Chinese, and so they really like it. They like strong things, strong, fishy, bitter things. And it's curious because the first time I went over there and taught, did an intro course and is certified in Hong Kong, which was, I think, 2008. Especially in Hong Kong, what it became apparent to us is that, the way the students were calibrating tannin was off. It's just like for them, there was no such thing as too much tannin. And so they didn't understand why you couldn't drink Cabernet with oysters in the half shell, things like that. And then it occurred to me that, from the time they're babies, they're drinking tea, right? They're getting tea.
Oh, yeah.
Tannin. So they grow up with tannin and at some point they must become immune to it. And so there is no such
Hmm.
thing as too much tannin for them. So that's a very curious thing if you think about for
Interesting.
Chinese sommeliers and how they're pairing wine, in that they can probably use practically any red wine with practically any dish, and it's fine. Whereas, in other cultures, that would be a problem. So, yeah.
That's interesting. I love those weird intersections of cultures that you just don't expect. One of our waiters at the restaurant is Mormon,
Hmm.
and I'm so used to describing to beginning waiters tannin in terms of, it's that mouthfeel you get a wine. Oh, you can't drink. Well, it's tea. And she said, yeah, we don't drink tea.
Yeah.
And so I had to just
Or
go to eating
coffee.
grapes. Yeah.
Wow.
So,
That's a good one. So
yeah.
maybe Andiv or Radicchio, who knows?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But,
You could go those natural plant tannin
yeah.
like materials too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I was hoping to start off and ask you, and I thought it'd be fresh in your mind since you just got done with the
Yep.
course, if you could remake the course, if you were all of a sudden king of the Court of Master Somms, what would you do differently? Or is there anything major or systemic you'd change? Or
No, I'm not a person who I'm well, a person who tweaks existing systems. And so I think the pillars of what the MS program is, in terms of service, because it's a sommelier organization that separates us from all the other wine certification organizations. And then the tasting is really part.
I'm sorry, you are cutting out just a little bit there.
Okay,
Oh, there you
is that better? Okay,
go. Oh, you're back now. You're back
okay.
now.
So I was
Sorry.
saying, there's the pillars of the program, the tasting theory and service. Especially the emphasis has to be on service because we're a sommelier organization, and that's what we do, and that separates us from all the other wine certification organizations. Um, and then the tasting is certainly a sommelier tableside describing a wine to a guest, and that's where it originated from, and it certainly has morphed over the years into something a certain form and protocol. And then the theory, of course, underpins everything, even tasting. So so anyway, would I change anything? No. What I would the only thing I would do is reintroduce a service component at the intro course, because originally,
Oh yeah.
yeah, originally there was and still is a service component. So our counterparts in the UK and the EU, they still do a service component, opening bottle, still wine, and some tray service with their intro course. And when the intro course came here, which I think was 1989 or 1990, the powers that be decided that the numbers would really quickly become so big that we wouldn't be able to do it. And sure enough, within 5, 6 years after the fact, intro courses were like 70, 80 people, and it would require a third day, right? And so it just, it was decided it's just impractical, which is too bad because I think even at the intro course, it's one thing to see a service demonstration or watch a video. It's another thing to get up there and show you can open a bottle of still wine, and at least service, and you know how to, place and remove glassware and answer real simple questions. So that's the only thing I think we could do, and I don't know how we would do it. It would take literally a third day. Otherwise than that, I wish there was a way.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Do you have a question?
Oh no, no, I was just agreeing. I
Yeah.
was just agreeing.
Yeah.
I'm remembering my intro.
Yeah, the other thing is that I'm sure you figured this out, and if you get to know any number of MSs, we all have specialties. You certainly you pass the set of exams, and you have a really in-depth general knowledge about wine and spirits, but you end up doing specializing. Like for me, it's tasting, and for a long time it was spirits, and it was German wine, and now it's pretty much tasting. So, but at our advanced course, and I believe you've taken it, right? Um, you know,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
the people who teach those lectures, those are experts. I mean, they're world class experts in whatever the subject is, be it sherry, or be it Italian wine, be it mezcal, or whatever. I mean, they know it as well as anyone. So I just wish we could, record those, and those would be available for people in the industry, or at least our students. Because I think
Oh
I mean, we're
yeah.
talking about a vast data bank of really brilliant people who know this stuff. So that's the only thing, and I push for that. And hopefully, near term, we're going to get the funding, and we'll figure that out and do it. Because I think that should be available. It should be even for people who are going to take the intro course, if they're interested in learning about the Mosel or they want to know about sherry, they can go to our YouTube channel and they can watch Chris Bates talk about sherry, or they can watch Jesse Becker talk about Austria and the Mosel. So that kind of thing. But I think it's more education now that we have more ways to do it. Because even though we now have 200 students taking the advanced course every year, we're not reaching enough people. And who's to say even
Hmm.
people, if they're not in our program, they should still benefit by it. That's what I think. So
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of the. I know it's Guildsom is not the court, but a lot
right,
of.
sure, yeah, the Guild Somm's brilliant. Yeah, they do a lot of brilliant work. Absolutely, yeah. And to me, that's still the best online resource for wine education there is. Those guys, Steve, Chris Tangi, and Jonathan Eichholz, those guys are brilliant. Yeah.
I was gonna say, funny enough, I think we talked about this briefly on the phone. You asked if I've been in the advanced course,
Hmm.
but I was actually at your table when I was at the
Oh my
advanced. But
goodness, it shows you how good my memory is.
yeah, well, I on the phone I said, I'm sure you've taught thousands and thousands of
Yeah,
people how to taste at
yeah,
this point.
yeah.
So yeah. So I was going to ask, for the listener out there who, I think the average Joe in a restaurant who has to taste wine and describe it tableside, maybe they don't have a qualified somm around.
Hmm.
Are there any tips or tricks that you could tell someone like, how to even just begin to approach wine? I know that's like
Yeah,
the broadest question in the world.
yeah. Short question, long
Yeah.
answer. But there are ways. And they've even written something about it somewhere. But I think even people who drink wine once in a while, they have favorites that they can remember, right? And so I think just you're going to go into a restaurant and you may be even handed the wine list in front of your friends or peers or whatever, and just going in and knowing what you like, right? So I had, ex Pinot Grigio, or I had this Chardonnay that I really liked. And if you go in equipped with that and you can tell the servers, I had this wine one time and I really liked it. What do you have that's similar, right? And if you get beyond that and you can't get anywhere, take a look at the wine by the glass list and pick one thing or two things and ask to taste them. You know, just say, hey, I'm looking for this is I like Chardonnay or I don't like Chardonnay or whatever, and I'm looking at your wine by the glass list, and what do you think I'd like? Because here's what I tend to like when I drink at home. What do you think would work? And the server at least should be able to handle that, or somebody who's working the shift should be able to handle that. And then of course, if you have more knowledge than that, you probably know what you like and you have a price point. So you should be shameless about telling them that too. Say, hey, you know what? We're here for a nice dinner. We're looking at your list. This is great. You got a lot of wines. I'm looking for white wine. I don't like white wine with oak, but here's my price range. And what do you think would work? What's good? You know, and or the magic question is always to ask, especially if you're talking to a sommelier, what have you gotten in that you really like? What do you think is a great value and you really think people should try? And odds are they're going to get dangerously excited really fast because they're going to go, oh, I care, or he or
Yeah.
she cares about my list, and they recognize I put work into it. And so, yeah, oh, you got to try these things because that's the moment sommeliers live for. When somebody says, what do you think? And what do you think I ought to try? You know, and
Mm.
odds are it's going to be good. Now it could be strange, but odds are it won't be.
Yeah.
Odds are it'll be good. So.
Well, I did just read your section in Strong Water about natural wine,
Yeah.
and that brought up some good points.
Well, yeah, it's funny
That's a
because
whole.
Tuesday night we were on our own for dinner. Usually at these exams, all the examiners, the powers that be have arranged dinner for us, and with that many of us, we had some nice meals Sunday, Monday night, and then Tuesday they just said you're on your own. A lot of us going to be working late, trying to crunch all the data. And so a group of nine of us went to Pizzeria Bianco. And if you're in Phoenix and you like pizza, you got to go there. Pizzeria Bianco. Doesn't see many people. They don't take reservations, but it's one of those certified Neapolitan pizza places, and it is amazing pizza, right? So at the same time, there's the group of us, 9 of us, and there's like 3 winemakers sitting, and somehow natural wine came up, and it really wasn't a positive discussion. Let me just say
Yeah.
that, and we're all listening to the guys who are winemakers, and they just said, yeah, you can pull it off. You can pull it off, but you got to have serious skills, and you have to have a
Mhm.
perfect, pristine cellar. And the wines
Yeah.
have to be microbiologically stable. If not, then all sorts of things go wrong, and you end up with wine that tastes like kombucha, right? And so,
Mhm.
but they said it can be done, but not many people pull it off. And so that was
Yeah.
the general, you know, gist of the conversation. So
Yeah. Kind of think of it like you can survive a broken bone without going to the doctor. You can.
yeah,
Just
yeah.
you don't
Well,
have to anymore, you know?
yeah, I mean, it's a whole. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. See, it's a very open-ended discussion because there are people all over the planet who are brilliant winemakers who, frankly, don't do a lot to their wines, and they don't add a lot of
Mhm.
sulfur. Sometimes they don't add sulfur at all, but those people know exactly what they're doing, and they have who knows how many years of experience, and they just know. They know their vineyards. They have a good idea what's going to happen, even with vintage variation. They just know what to do. I mean, I think of, even some of the most expensive Burgundy, like Loire, there's very little sulfur added to that wine or those wines. And they're brilliant. So again, you know, there's no easy answer to it. I think it can be a really interesting category, but it's also a category that is just, sometimes you open a bottle and it's a chemistry project. So,
See what happens.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I kind of derailed us with natural wine, but
Okay.
you were kind of guiding us through the server becoming the somm to be.
Yeah.
And so the big thing that I take from what you said is honestly openness, I think. Just
Yeah.
trying a lot of things and being
Yeah,
open.
that's one thing, but there's one thing that's like the ring of power that rules them all and brings them in, and in the darkness binds them, and that's really the feeling of taking care, of caring for people. That's hospitality.
Mm,
If you have that as a server, you will do little wrong. And not only that, if something goes wrong, you can fix it because all you care about is taking care of the table. I mean, that's the essence of
mm,
hospitality. And that's really difficult to teach. Some people just have it inherently, and then
mhm,
in a restaurant, it has to come from the top down. I mean, Bobby at Frasca is a perfect
mhm.
example. I mean, service at his restaurant is like a cult. You walk in there and you can tell the place is different. Shelley Lindgren at A16 San Francisco, same thing. You walk in there and there's multiple people at your table throughout a meal, but they are so attentive, but they're not like right in your face, but they are constantly, everybody that goes past your table is looking at it every time. And it's just and that kind of thing, it just creates an amazing dining experience. So, and the question then is, how do you hire for that? I mean, how do you hire people who care and find out if they
Yeah.
care?
I mean, that's the
Yeah,
$1 million question in the
yeah, it
restaurant
is.
industry.
And you know what? It's harder than ever after the pandemic because,
Yeah.
that's one of the tragedies, our industry, the restaurant industry, is that, during the pandemic, we had all these really seasoned, absolute pro service people, and they had to pivot and go away.
Mm,
They couldn't wait for the restaurants to open. They had to go do something else. And we lost that collective traditional wisdom, a whole demographic of it. And we've been trying to replace it ever since. And we're going to be trying for who knows how long. So, but again, training people to care and to take care of the table, and for them, then you can train them to do anything, right? If they care.
yeah, I like that. And on that note, the pandemic wasn't all a loss.
Mm.
I think one really good thing that came out of that was your first book.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Well, that's a
yeah.
tiny
If
thing,
if you can't
Andrew.
leave the house, yeah.
Yeah, so I worked on the
So
tasting book for 10 years, right? In fact, some of the
yeah, yeah.
chapters, I wrote the first versions in 2005, 20 years ago.
Mm,
And I was education chair and then director from 2003 to 2011, and then Shane Bjornholm was taken over. He's doing a brilliant job since. But I didn't have any time to write when I was doing that. I was just so busy. In January 2012, started a blog, still going, timgaiser.com blog. The latest blog post is about a family reunion and a really good bottle of wine at 9,000 feet in northern New Mexico a few weeks ago. But again, I the book is just about, it's an in-depth book on deductive tasting, and it comes from a place of me trying to figure it out, because when I was taking the exams, eons ago, I was a really bad taster, really lousy, and tasting didn't make sense. And so, and it really didn't. I had to work really hard at it. And even after I passed the MS tasting exam on the second attempt, I didn't feel like I really had a clue. And so it became kind of
Mhm.
an obsession to figure it out, but also figure it out so that I could share it for other people, so it wouldn't be so hard, right? And so that's what the book is about. It's really for anyone. I mean, I had to go back at Madeline Triffon. She's a dear friend and fellow MS, because she read it and she goes, you can't control who's going to read the book. You need to make this book so everybody can at least have a clue what you're talking about. And so I rewrote
Mhm.
all the chapters so that there's an introduction. And then after the fact, there's how you can apply the information. But it's all about basic skills, advanced skills. And then there's a whole chapter on improving your smell and taste memory. And then there's some essays. But I hope it's one of those, I hope it's a reference that people can use over time, and will help them figure out what they do internally already. Because by the time someone's of drinking age, they are long past the point, mentally, where they do things. From the time we're infants, we smell things and somehow remember them. And so by the time you get to be 21 and ostensibly you're of drinking age, you have ways of doing things and remembering how things smell and taste. So I hope what the book provides in part is just a way of you becoming aware of what you do, which is unique. And everybody has the same nervous system, but we all are wired differently. Some of us wired really differently. And so that's hopefully that's what the book can bring, is some strategies to help you figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean it's fantastic. At this point, I've had three of my servers go through and get their certified, and I have the fourth working right now.
That's
And
great.
I've just, in addition to what tastings we do for pre-shift meetings and that sort of thing, I've made all of them get this book.
Oh,
So
good. Oh, good.
it's been a huge help
Yeah.
because yeah,
Well, I would
just
say next year the book's going to be revised, because what it doesn't have a glossary or an index. Needs both of those. And certainly,
mm,
I'm going to do another serious edit on it. And the idea of making it, simpler, because simple is good. This is such a complex thing that it needs to be simple, in terms of how
yeah.
it's explained.
Actually, that is a good point. One of my favorite lines from Strongwater, I have it written here, is we communicate about wine to the consumer by making the complex simpler without dumbing it down.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so good. I
Yeah.
highlighted that right away. I was like,
Well, easier said than done, huh?
that's the whole
Yeah.
problem. Yeah,
Again,
that's
man, it's a tightrope, because I mean, that's all the unspoken things about being a server or a sommelier or someone at a table talking about wine, is in somehow you have to read the guests what they really want, and their depth of knowledge about wine, and how much they want to know. And so that's not easy to do. And so that presupposes that you've got a pretty good backlog, then you can talk sensibly about wine, but that also you're sensitive to the fact of not giving someone too much information, because then I mean, they just don't want to know. They just want a nice bottle of wine to share with their future ex-boyfriend, right?
or you walk to that table and it's their first anniversary and they don't
Yeah,
care. They haven't even noticed they're in a restaurant.
yeah.
Just bring them the
But
bottle.
see,
It's gonna be
there,
fine.
Andrew, that's a good point, because their first anniversary, if you give them the right bottle, they're going to remember it forever, right? It's going to be a thing. And they're just going to say, they're going to, who knows how many times in the future they'll say, you remember that dinner at the restaurant for our first anniversary and that bottle of wine was so amazing? That's the kind of thing that you can help create. So yeah, that makes it all worth it too.
Awesome, awesome. So with your book, The Message in the Bottle, I was hoping we could talk. I'm sure you've talked about this endlessly, but I find it fascinating.
Mhm.
I think it's the basic set,
Yeah,
like how you put together that whole tasting method, because
yeah,
I think that is one of the things that helped me. And I'm hoping later, before we get done here, I did want to ask you too about, so my personal issue with tasting, and I think a lot of people suffer from this, is I get in my head.
mm,
And so like even when I got into the advance, I passed theory and service, and on tasting, I think it was between glass 4 and 5,
mhm.
I just got so nervous and kind of in my head I lost time. I didn't finish the
Yeah,
sixth, but it cut out enough points that I didn't. So like, do you have any good tactics for that, or is that something you see in a lot of people?
yeah,
And
sure. I mean,
I'm sure.
that's test anxiety. I mean, people, the thing about our exams is that they're kind of like auditions. So
Mm,
you work really hard and you practice and you practice and then you come in there on game day and then your nervous system has to cooperate. So it has to
mm,
allow you to bring your game, right? Because your nervous system can only do one thing at a time. It can't freak out and it can't function and allow you to do it. You can't do it at the same time. So again, that's a whole separate skill set. I mean, there's a couple of things in the third section of the tasting book that are about that. But it really you somehow have to be able to shut the world out and then really focus on the set of wines. And I mean, there are ways
mm,
to do it. Oddly enough, one of the major things is eye positions that trigger certain emotional states. I mean, there's a chapter called "Clearing the Mechanism" in the book that's exactly
mhm,
about
yeah.
that. And because that's what you need to do. You need basically to shut the world out, except for the set of six glasses in front of you, and that is your world. And from there, you need to know the grid cold. It just needs to be like a shopping list that lives inside, and you're just going to go through it. And then there's the sense of curiosity that has to be stronger than anything. Like, what am I smelling? What am I seeing? What am I tasting? What's in the glass? Constantly, you're asking yourself that. And even if you're not saying it internally, there's the feeling of what's there. And then from there, your brain's going to find the answer. It's going to find an answer because you've tasted enough. You're there, and the grid again is like an outline or a shopping list. And you're just going through it saying, okay, well, what's the color? What's the secondary color? What's the brightness level? What's the viscosity? What am I smelling for fruit? What are the non-fruits? What's important? And then you get to the structure and you taste that and said, how much acidity? And your brain is going to answer those questions really quickly, right? And so it's really
Mm,
a question answer thing that you're going through. And then it's kind of like being a machine because you're not doing anything creative. The tasting exams are not creative. They're you showing your skill at a very specific method and doing the same thing 6 times. There is nothing fancy or
mm,
creative there. But it's just you being really attentive to what's in the glass. So if your mental energy is on that, then the thoughts of you projecting something onto the wine rarely creep in, right? Because there's no room for it. Again, it's trying to do two things at the same time mentally, which is you can, I guess. I don't know,
yeah. Okay.
but that's just it. And then and then where the book goes is that there are eye positions for both of those things. And I can tell you, having sat across the people from, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of students in exams, and even watched my fellow MSs and some MWs, the way they taste, when we pick up a glass and start smelling, our eyes tend to go to the same place every time. And they're there for a split second, and then they move. And
Mhm,
but the eyes going to the same place is one of the ways we're consistent with our tasting. And then where they
mm.
move is to get the answer to the question they just asked. What am I smelling? And the eyes pop up and then go, oh, okay, that internally, that's what I'm smelling. So that wasn't an answer to your question.
It was in a bleak way,
Yeah.
yeah.
So now to answer your question, so the thing about the basic set is the old Pareto's law, the law of the vital few, the 80-20. And that's in anything, 20% of what's there tends to do 80% of the work or is 80% of the results. And taking that into another context, in wine, there's probably about 25 to 30 aromas and flavors that are in most wines. So things like green apple and mushroom and roses and vanilla and potting soil, things like that. There's a set of things. Some of them fruit, some of them winemaking, some of them environmental. And if your memory for those things in terms of what they smell and in some cases taste like is really good, when you pick up a glass of wine, they pop. They're there. They're really there.
Mhm.
And so my thing is the way my brain works is to what I call front load is literally to work backwards. So if I'm working on my memory of those things without wine, I can do that any number of times. I don't have to be tasting. So that when I do pick up a glass of wine, the synapses that have to do with smell and taste memory are really honed. And and then those aromas and flavors are there. And then you can put together, you connect dots easier, theoretically. Yeah.
No, yeah, that's so. I'm glad that we're talking through this too, because as I'm reconstructing this in my head, I'm sure that you get a lot of questions about how you use modalities too,
Yeah.
because that's one of those that I could find some like some benefit, but I don't know if I maybe wasn't doing it well enough. Maybe I'm just not enough of a visual thinker.
Mhm.
And I know that you say that people are all visual tasters, basically. And so, like,
Yeah. Yeah. But
from what you've
yeah. I mean,
experienced.
the majority of us in a similar way. There are people
Mhm.
who are true synesthetes and they're Martians the way they think. I mean, they just operate in a totally different way than we do. I'd say one, two, or three people out of 100. And, Sir Lucero, who's an MS, is that way. He's a synesthete. And
Mhm.
his way of internally processing wine is just so different from mine. Gillian Handelman, who's head of education for Kendall Jackson, same way. In fact, people listening to this, you ought to go to the Kendall Jackson website and just put her name in, Gillian with one L, Gilian, Handelman, and
Mhm.
and then just search on her name, and she has pictures for all the grape varieties for what she sees, and it's kind of wild.
Oh, that's cool.
It's kind of wild
Yeah.
because people
Yeah.
they literally both of them project shapes out of their heads or their bodies for the wines,
Mhm.
which
Well, I've often wondered if you had some sort of synesthesia, because you do talk
uh,
about scales that you've
yeah,
sort of
sure,
pictured in your mind,
sure.
and
So I mean
yeah.
constructs, I mean that's with structure, I mean with acid, alcohol, and tannin. But for the internal stuff, like the fruit, non-fruit, and all that good stuff, it's images for me. I put my nose in the glass and I go, "What's there?" I look down and to the left, eyes pop out front, about 10 to 12 feet away, and then in my personal IMAX theater, images just start appearing really quickly. And once they appear,
Mhm.
they sink down, and they're by category. So there's fruit, not non-fruit, earth, and wood, four categories, and they're kind of like cafeteria plates that are stacked on end. So they're behind each other, and they're kind of slightly. I can see them all. And if something's really important, it's in the front and it's big. And when I taste the wine from smelling it, they rearrange. But the categories, if I try to move them around, they snap back. They don't move. And I never knew this until someone helped me figure it out. A guy named Tim Halbum. But that's, and then for structure, when I taste for structure, I see like a scale. And there's a red button on it, and there's the low, medium, minus, medium, medium, plus high. And I just watch the button move and I point to it. And that way, visually, I have
Mhm.
something to confirm what I'm sensing, feeling in my mouth, like how much acid. And if you don't have that, that's really tough to figure out. I think you have like a Beavis and Butthead moment. You don't know what's going on, right? And so you're
Mhm.
saying, I
Yeah.
have no idea how much acid that is. But then if you're watching something, you go, yeah, it's right there. So that's how I do the structure. And then, obviously I have an internal list of, the impact compounds that are important, things like carbonic
Mhm.
maceration and stem inclusion, pyrazines for Sauvignon Blanc, rotundone, white pepper for Gruner Veltliner, what else? Botrytis, things like that. And so they're important
Mhm.
compounds. And those to me, those are literally lighting up. And when I'm trying to, if I were blind tasting those things, that group of pattern, it's like a pattern of things would come out in front, and I would go, well, you got this, 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 and this, and the structure is this. Odds are it's this. And that sounds kind of science fiction, but you would be surprised. A lot of people have some kind of system like that, but they may not be
Yeah.
aware of it because it's tough to do something and be aware of your process at the same time.
Yeah, I'm wondering because I know that music and wine have such a big place in
Mhm.
your. And you've written about both in
Yeah,
a lot of different
yeah.
places. When you were in band, when you were playing,
Mhm.
did you also have a visual representation? Because I know you were a brass instrument, right?
Right, trumpet. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
trumpet.
well, yeah. I mean, at the unconscious level, in which case it would be really fast.
Hmm.
But I will tell you, way back in fourth grade, when I first started to play the trumpet, the book that we were supposed to use in band wasn't available for like a week, right? And so I had my cornet, and then I would try to practice or play things, and I didn't know fingerings, I didn't know anything. And so the first week was just hell. I was in my bedroom making noise. I'm sure I drove my family nuts. And then after a week, the book came into the music store, and I went down and I bought it. And I remember this though. All of a sudden, there was a fingering chart. The trumpet only has three keys, right? And so I was
Hmm.
practicing, and I was getting the fingering downs, and I could see notes and associate them to a fingering and a pitch. And once I figured that out, something snapped, and I played through the book in a weekend. So that when I came back for band on Monday, I could play all the songs. And it's not because I was a good trumpet player. No, it's because for me personally, the idea of being able to see something and equate it to sound and then kinesthetic, it was there. And that was the click. And
Hmm.
what's a parallel is that eons later, when I was studying for the MS tasting exam, literally the first time I took the MS exam, the fourth exam, the tasting exam, I just crashed and burned. And it's because I didn't know the grid well enough. And when you know the grid well enough is when you own it and it's inside, when you can see it, and it's like it's always there and you always know what's next. Until you get to that point, and until I got to that point, tasting didn't make a lot of sense to me. It was hard. I was inconsistent. But once the grid went inside and I mentally had rehearsed going through wines with it enough, then all of a sudden it made sense and I knew the process. So that's what I tell students to do. You have to know it that well. So, yeah.
Hmm. Now, the reason I was asking is so I was alto sax,
Mm,
and I
okay.
and in my head I was thinking it is kind of more of a feeling, but I think that I'm on your camp now because you need those visual representations of the notes to relate to the kinesthetic
Yeah.
experience, like you're saying.
Well, the good
And
thing,
I
I mean,
think that what I'm running from,
Andrew, the good thing about
yeah,
saxophone, if you push the right keys down, you get the right note. Whereas with the trumpet,
yeah,
there's
exactly,
no guarantee because of the harmonic series. You could put the right fingerings down and come out with something totally different. Happens all the
yeah.
time, and odds are it's really loud too.
Hmm. So yeah, I think what I was landing on is unfortunately I think I just need to learn the grid better,
Yeah.
and I was hoping I could talk my way out of that, but
No,
probably
no,
not.
and you know what's cool about that, Andrew? Think about it for a second. So, I mean, people, someone in your position, you want to pass the advanced, right? The advanced exam,
Mhm.
and then you're going to go on and you're going to prepare for the MS exam. And at some point, hopefully you're going to pass it because what you want to be is we want to switch sides. So in the future, you want to be on my side and you want to be interviewing people who are studying for the exams. In which case,
Mhm.
you know the grid so well and tasting so well that you can teach it. So that's where you have to get to is that you know the grid so well that you could explain it to anybody, even your friends who aren't into wine. You could, without piece of paper or anything, you could say, when we look at wine in an exam, here's what we do. Yeah, we see clarity. Clarity means filtering. We need the color, and the color in red wine depends on these things, and white wines. And you can explain it because if you can teach it, it's in long-term memory and you own it. But that's where the grid has to
Mhm.
go. That you have to think about it enough to where you can explain it. And if you can explain it, you own it. So
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah, and I haven't done it from memory. I've done it classes for servers, but I think you're right.
yeah,
It just takes time.
yeah, it
Yeah,
does.
I need more work and more study, and
Yeah,
yeah.
but the thing is, it's a fun thing because this is where you're working with your memory, and again, you don't need wine to do that because tasting, and you're a busy guy, and you only have so much time to taste, but you can take a minute or 2 minutes, and you can think about, the grid, And then you can start applying it to classic grapes and wine. You can say, well, you think about how Zinfandel and Syrah, Shiraz compare, and how they're very similar, but they're
Mhm.
really different, And what's different about them? Well, the structure can be really similar, but at the same time, there's all these savory, sanguine notes in Syrah, Shiraz that they're just not in Zinfandel, you know. So
Mhm.
there's things like that, and that's your memory. That's your memory working. And
Yeah.
when you pick up a glass of wine, it's all perception, recognition, and memory. So
No, and I'm glad that you brought up that Zinfandel, Shiraz. So one thing I told myself I wanted to remember to ask you: did you come up with the term "evil dwarves" or did you steal that from someone? Because
okay,
that
so
perfect.
yeah, you have to know. So
I've used that just so you know. Yeah.
yeah, so of course, I have kids. My daughter Maria is 35. My son Patrick is 32, but Patrick has cognitive disabilities. He lives with us,
Hmm.
and so he still is all about Disney, DreamWorks, and Pixar. So that even though for parents, their kids get older, they become adults, and that goes away. It's never gone away. So I can talk SpongeBob episodes. I can I can deliberate endlessly on the two versions of Aladdin. I mean, just on and on because Patrick and we talk about this stuff. So the dwarves, I mean, there's a remake of Snow White this year that was released. And so we were talking about all the dwarves, and how Dopey can talk. And you find that out at the end of the movie. All this stuff. So the evil dwarves came from that. Snow White, right? But I also
Okay.
thought about, for me, I remember studying for the MS tasting exam, and there were just certain white wines and red wines that just confused me. And the reason they confused me is A, they looked alike, B, they had similar fruit qualities, and at the same time, they all have different impact compounds and sets of structure things. And so that's the focus. And so the chapter on evil dwarves is really to how all these grapes and wines are different from each other. I mean, with whites, you've got Chenin Blanc, you've got Riesling, Albarino, Gruner Veltliner, and Pinot Gris, Pinot Grigio, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and then for red wines, it's all the relatively speaking thinner skinned red grapes like Grenache, Pinot Noir, Tempranillo, Sangiovese, and then Nebbiolo, anything else, Gamay. Yeah. So it's about those and literally how to set them up, how to work with them, and then how to learn them so that they become like different people that you don't confuse.
Mm.
And that takes repetition. And I think you do that by tasting them in pairs. And obviously, you get a Coravin. You got to own a Coravin, and you're tasting.
Yep. I got a Corvin thanks to you. So thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, because otherwise you spend too
Yeah.
much money. And
Mm.
so you buy really good examples of, let's just say, a Beaujolais Village, and then something like Chianti Classico, which is to me is like Elvis and Beyonce. They're so different. Um, and then you taste them repeatedly, over a
Yeah.
course of 2 to 3 days. And at some point, your mind just snaps. It goes, oh, yeah, okay. Now I see. These wines, there's no confusing them. And they live now in different places in your head. The problem is when wines get too close together when you think of them in terms of how you visualize them. If they're too close
Mm.
together, you confuse them. And if they get farther apart, you go, oh, yeah, yeah, okay, these are different.
Yeah. No. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I did want to make sure we talk a little bit more about strong water
Yeah.
too, because yeah, great,
Stronghold is a fun
great.
book. I hope people are listening to this, and not because it's shameless self promotion, but I hope they buy it because it's a fun book, right? So
Yeah.
it's just a book
No.
of essays on food, wine, and restaurants and my experiences. Like my first restaurant job
Yeah.
of bussing tables in a pancake house here in Albuquerque from 6 p.m. to 4 a.m.
Oh yeah, Darla, good
Oh
old
yeah, yeah. Oh
Darla.
man, she was like Tammy Wynette's evil twin. She was tough. She was really tough. And
Yeah.
there's a time where she would
Yeah.
just
No.
go through not a dining room, but she would go through the restaurant with a lit cigarette. Just yeah, I mean, she was something. But then the first bar I worked at, on Union Street in San Francisco, that had a really bad rat problem, right? And I was a bartender there,
Oh
and
yes. Yeah.
yeah, and then
The rat that jumped over the sleeping
oh yeah,
guy. I had to laugh at
oh yeah.
that. Yeah. What happened?
Yeah, I
Nothing.
mean,
Nothing.
yeah, and there were a lot
Yeah.
more rat stories. I mean, that restaurant was like a Fellini movie. It really was. It was something else. Yeah, and then there's stories about being on wine trips, the scary ass car rides, total shower tragedies. I think when you're on the road a lot, the one thing you have to figure out when you get in your hotel room is how the shower works. You don't want to be surprised at 6 a.m. the next morning when you don't have any
Yeah.
time. And then there's just there's a lot of things like that. There's evolution of a palate, where I write about these fictitious stages. When you begin and you like sweet wines, that's the Katy Perry phase, right? And then your Cabernet becomes monster truck pull. Chardonnay is like smooth jazz. So anyway, there's just a lot of things that I meant to be, just to be kind of not snarky, but funny and, poking fun at the wine business more than anything. So,
Sure. Yeah. I think so. I had a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about here on that. The first one we don't really have to talk about. It was a really good line from the beginning. Is over time I've come to believe that there are two great equalizers in life: parenthood and the restaurant business.
yes.
But also in that like section, I really knew that it was towards the beginning. This part where you said that you figured out you had restaurant
Yeah.
eyes, the sixth sense.
Yeah.
So you were able to articulate something I noticed about myself when I first went into a bar
Hmm.
that I never could. That like, oh, I belong here. I can see what needs to be done. You
Right.
like
Right. Yeah.
so it was cool seeing like someone else who had seen
Yeah.
that
The
before.
problem is that it never leaves you, right? I mean, I've worked in a
Mhm.
restaurant over 30 years. But I know people who worked in restaurants for a long time, and it just never leaves you. And it's kind of a curse because you can be, in a restaurant dining and you're looking around and you can see what needs to be done. And you have this urge to go do something, right? To clear a table or to, pour more
Help somehow.
coffee
Yeah.
or refill water and stuff like that. But it's, if you have that, the restaurant business is a lot easier. If you don't have it, you struggle, right? And plus, you
Yeah.
just need to be fast. I mean, I think people who, and I could be wrong here, but people who are really good at restaurants have some kind of attention deficit disorder, in that they can keep a lot of things in their internal field that need to be done in 5 minutes, and those things they can prioritize on the fly, and
Mm.
things get done and something else comes in, and they're used to just keeping a lot of stuff in their head that they need to do like right now, and some kind of rarefied form of triage. The problem is when people like that leave the restaurant business, a 9 to 5 job is really hard, because instead of 5 minutes to do 10 things, they have 8 hours. And my first job out of the restaurant business was selling. I was very fortunate. I got to work for the Heights family in Napa Valley, in Kathleen Heights, and of course Joe. And yeah, it was amazing. But yeah, I found selling wine, and most of my accounts were in San Francisco, and I would just where I lived, and I would get stuff done, and I would be done by noon or 1 o'clock, and I would be done. Yeah, and so sales for somebody like me was perfect, right? And oddly enough, after I worked for Peter Granoff, dear friend, who started virtualvineyardswine.com, the original wine.com. And after it went away in 2001, I became an independent contractor, which was perfect. And that's what I've done since 2001. In fact, I'm sitting in this home office, and that's what I still do. So yeah, so that really fitted me. But the restaurant business, is certain kinds of people do really well at it, and and some people have it in their blood, and they're very special. You wish you could clone them, you know, because
Yeah.
and there's a lot of people that shouldn't be in the restaurant business, or even, yeah.
Yeah. No. And my wife, we met in a restaurant. She's
Mm,
9 to 5 now, and
okay.
she still has those dreams. And I wanted
Oh,
to
they don't go
throw
away.
that out there because I think
Sadly,
it's been a long time since I've read a book with a dream nightmare, and
yeah,
I
sadly
laughed
you have to.
out loud.
Yeah, sadly you have to tell her that they don't ever go away. So my wife Carla, she was a bartender. Literally, she was in restaurants about 8 years longer than me. So when
Hmm.
the year after I passed the EMS, we had Patrick and Carla did, and I really wanted to get off the floor so I'd have more time at home to help with now a 4-year-old and an infant. And so that was my way of doing it. And Carla, on the other hand, loved bartending, loved it. If she could still do it, she would still do it. But she still has bartending dreams. She still does. She had this really horrible one, a few nights ago, and I just went, whoa. And I still have weird restaurant dreams too, but sometimes they combine with trumpet nightmares too. So I get both things going. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if nothing else, pick up Strong Waters so you can hear about the White Russians and the soup pairing from
Yeah.
Tim's stream.
Oh,
so, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I laughed out loud when I read that. I was like, only in Dreamland would someone do that.
Yes.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Tim Gaiser. Where should people listening follow you, and where can they find out more about what you do?
Yeah, so timgaiser.com, and then the blog is there. And then I have a Substack for all the non-wine stuff. So every week I'm publishing either a blog or a Substack, and the Substack is called Hits and Missives. And again, that's where I really push the envelope in terms of snarky, funny things. Sometimes with language, and sometimes with other life experiences. Growing up in a big Catholic family, that kind of thing. Or
I did see one about automatopoeias. I think,
yeah.
recently.
Oh yeah, where I made up a bunch of new ones. Yeah. So yeah, and so that's fun. So I would just urge people to follow me. People with wine questions, if you go on the website, my email's on it. Don't email me about relationship advice. Someone did that once. It was kind of strange. But if you do have a wine question,
we'll find out that Tim's very brutally honest. Unfortunately,
actually, I'm a really nice guy who will tell you to go find a couples counselor or something like that. So.
But, maybe more people should email you questions about relationships.
Anything, but I hope people check out the tasting book, and there are plans for an advanced tasting book too, and we'll see what the schedule for that is. I have the outline for it. A few things are written, but I also want to think. I think about. I'd really love to somehow bring in the MS community, which is a group of the best tasters on the planet, and figure out how we can do something for the industry at large with tasting. And I'm not sure what that is, but I'm working on that too. So and I'm working on 2 books at the present. One is called First Glass, and it's not a beginning wine book, but it's a book. It's a book I needed in graduate school when I got interested in wine. I had all these questions, and I was just afraid to ask them because people would think I was really stupid and I didn't know. A question like, do red wines go through malolactic? I remember asking a guy in a wine shop that question, and he looked at me like I was an idiot. And I thought, at that point I thought, if I ever learn about wine, I'm never going to do that. I'm going to answer the question. That was a good question. So the book is that kind of thing about everything from winemaking to grape growing to you're in a restaurant. What do you do with a wine list? You're in a retail shop. How do you pick out a good wine? And so it's that kind of book. It's not for a beginner per se, but it's for someone who likes wine a lot, who drinks it, but wants to learn more. So it's called First Class. And then there is another book on non-fiction essays, hits and missives from the Substack, but also new stuff too. Because I write every day that I can. If I'm on the road, I don't. But I usually write for an hour to 2 hours. I started something today, and hopefully we'll get it finished this afternoon. I try to write 1,000 words a day. It doesn't always get there, but
nice. Well, Tim, thank you for taking time out of your day, and it was a pleasure.
Andrew, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and best of luck.
Thank you again for listening. That's the end of our show today. My name's Andrew, and this is Serves You Right. If you haven't, please subscribe to the show. Everyone who subscribes helps this show grow and get cooler guests on, and it sure does mean a lot to me. We put out new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday. We'll see you then. Thanks.